I want to share a reflection, something I was thinking about today, about the need to correspond to God's grace when He offers it. And I kind of touched on this in the last video, but God offers us grace to do good things, to let go of vices, to pursue virtue, and to grow into the people that God has created us to be. And we are free to refuse those graces. We don't have to be faithful to them. We don't have to correspond to them. We don't have to accept them. We don't have to act on them. We can reject them. So a grace could be God giving you a stinging conscience about something. That's a grace. If there's something that you're doing that's wrong, and your conscience is biting you, and the Holy Spirit is calling you away from this vice or this imperfection, that's a grace. You can ignore it. God's not going to make you listen, typically. You can ignore it. You have free will. You can choose to act against the grace. But we're called as Christians, ideally, to act on every grace that God gives to us and to reject none of them, to always do exactly, to correspond exactly to the graces God is offering to us. I've been listening to a lot of Father Ripperger lately, and in one of his conferences that I was listening to, he was talking about the Blessed Mother and some things that were revealed to him by a demon. I don't know, it might have been Satan, I'm not sure, about the Blessed Mother during exorcism. And one of them is that she corresponded to all graces effectively, that she never said no to the Lord. She always did exactly what God asked her to do, and she did it without ever counting the cost. And I think that's a key point, although it's obviously so much easier said than done, to correspond to the graces God offers us. We have to try to get into the habit of not counting the cost, because that's what holds us back. You know, if we are living a sinful lifestyle, you know, let's say you're some young woman, you're living with your boyfriend or something like that, and you know you're not supposed to, you're not, fornication's wrong, and you can't go to communion anymore because you're rejecting God's love through mortal sin. You know that it's wrong. You know you need to either break up or get married. And God starts stinging your conscience. That's a grace, and you should correspond to it. You should accept it. But what's the first thing that happens when your conscience starts biting you about something? You start counting the cost. Oh, how much pain will I have to endure? What kind of pain am I going to inflict on somebody else? This is going to be so difficult. What about the financial situation? We're saving money by living together. I don't want to have to go to confession. What will the priest think of me? Whatever it is that's going on, you're counting the cost of what God's asking you to do, and that's what ends up causing so many of us. That's our motivation in choosing not to follow the graces. But the Blessed Mother, never counting the cost, was able to say, yes, thy will be done every single time. So ask the Blessed Mother for help with this, by the way. But I was thinking about today how we can get into habits after a long period of time, trying to be, a good Christian, where we actually are corresponding to God's graces. Because I would think most of us, if we're still actually practicing Catholics, we're corresponding to some graces that God is offering to us. Probably not all of them, but some of them, right? And we can get into these good habits of corresponding to God's graces in certain areas of our life where the cost isn't too great. There will be some people who are on the other side of this looking at something like the grace to go to Mass every Sunday, and they may be looking at that like that is just too costly. I can't do it. I can't bring myself to correspond to God's grace there and become Catholic and faithfully go to Mass every Sunday. But for a lot of Catholics who've been doing it from since they were, young, that one's not hard. That one's, you're already in the good habit. It's easy to do that. You may be routinely corresponding to God's grace there, maybe praying the rosary every day, following all the precepts of the church, that kind of thing. But we can, I think sometimes, even those of us who have built some spiritual life and we are getting into these good routines and good habits of corresponding to grace, we can get into a rut then where we are not corresponding to any new graces that God is offering to us. Like we feel like we've reached our limit. Okay, these are all the graces God offers me to grow in virtue and to remove my imperfections and vices. And I have corresponded to those graces as far as I'm willing, because anything past that is too much. And hey, it's good enough, right? I stay in a state of grace, or if I don't, I go to confession right away and I go to Mass when I'm supposed to. I mean, I'm being a good person, right? I'm doing all the stuff. I've got the bare minimum down. I should go to heaven if I die, right? Don't become presumptuous. My understanding of the way the spiritual life works is that there really is no standing still. You are either progressing in the spiritual life or you are sliding back. So take a careful look, and if you start feeling like you've kind of plateaued out, remind yourself that there is no plateau. You're going one direction or the other, so really take a hard look and figure out which direction that is, and if you need to switch directions, do so. But this is just a little reminder to look for that in your life, and if God is offering you graces to add, to grow in virtue, to remove those imperfections that you've been carrying around for years and years and years, don't get comfortable with where you're at. Never be comfortable with where you're at in the spiritual life. You should always be wanting to advance, because the room for advancement doesn't end. You'll never reach the end of this because it goes on, infinitely in heaven. So always be moving forward. There's always more you could be doing. And God is always offering us graces to do those things. So look for them and be willing to correspond to them, even if you feel like, these are all extra graces, right? I'm corresponding to all the graces for the basics, so all the other stuff is just extra. Don't think of it as extra, okay? Think of it as this is your path to being who God created you to be. And if you're not corresponding to them, you're refusing to take the path to be who God created you to be.